Hello Rec 3P06. Today I will be talking to you about Vuntut National Park. History. The Vuntut National Park is located in the Yukon. It is in the most northwestern part of the Yukon, and therefore one must fly into Old Crow and create a trip from there. To land a plane in the Vuntut Park, one must get permits from Parks Canada. The park was established in 1995 and is 1,073,673 acres. Currently, it is in the process of becoming a World Heritage Site. It is home to the Gwich'in people, and because of its remoteness, it is one of the least visited national parks in Canada. It is home to many wetlands, winding rivers, and rolling mountains. The First Nations co-manage the park alongside Parks Canada to preserve their way of life and their land. Wildlife that can be found in the Vuntut National Park is moose, muskrat, grizzly bears, wolves, wolverines, raptors, and many small mammals. It is home to the porcupine caribou, 500,000 migratory birds, and the caribou in the Vuntut Park is important to the people as it is their source of food. Outdoor recreation opportunities. As the park is not a highly popular area due to its remoteness, there are no facilities or developed trails in the park. In the park, people are able to canoe the Old Crow River, hike the mountains, and winter ski. Users of the park must register upon arrival and deregister when returning from trip. Failure to do so could result in a search party in which you may be responsible to pay for. Conflicts that could be encountered would be with the wilderness or the people of Vuntut Park. Natural hazards would include bear encounters, female caribou, moose with calves, bulls, and muskox. People must be aware of proper procedures when encountering wildlife. Firearms are not permitted in the park. Visitors must be prepared for large amounts of mosquitoes and black flies, as well as the dramatic climate in the northern tundra. The changing climate requires people to be prepared for any type of weather, which can go from hot to cold in a matter of hours. These weather conditions can leave travelers stranded, so extra food and fuel is important to consider. Users must be considerate and respectful of the people who live within the park area. Conservation is the act to use the land wisely. The Vuntut National Park aims to conserve their landscapes. They conserve their landscapes to protect the habitat of the porcupine caribou and the habitats of over 500,000 migratory birds. The area is a unique, unglaciated landscape that serves as a haven for plants and animals. Not only do the lands need to be conserved for the wilderness, but for the local people. Conserving the lands will also preserve their culture and heritage. Located in the territory of Vuntut, the lands are occupied by the Gwich'in First Nation culture, and have been for centuries. Vuntut's natural resources continue to be used by the Gwich'in for seasonal traditional activities such as hunting, trapping, fishing, and berry picking. Management objectives. The people involved are the Vuntut Gwich'in Government, North Yukon, Renewable Resource Council, and Parks Canada. They assess the ecological integrity, cultural and paleontological resources, external relations, which is public outreach education, and stakeholder and partner engagement, and visitor experience. Their purpose, according to the management plan, is to protect for all time a representative natural area of Canadian significance in the northern Yukon Natural Region, and to encourage public understanding, appreciation, and enjoyment of the area in a manner which leaves it unimpaired for future generations, and to recognize the Vuntut Gwich'in history and culture and protect the traditional and current use of the park by the Vuntut Gwich'in. They protect the land because of the significant wetlands in the Yukon, the porcupine caribou herds, the Gwich'in people, caribou fences, and the significant post-Bergian landscape. Their objective is to recognize the history and culture, protect the traditions of the Gwich'in, all-time protection of the natural area, encourage public understanding, appreciation, and enjoyment, which will sustain it for future generations and provide employment. Condition. Previously, the park was rarely used. It is one of the most recent to become a national park. As it is so remote, it hardly receives any visitors. This is good for the park as it can remain in its natural state. Without the visitors, degradation does not happen as fast a pace compared to places like Banff. Animals can continue with undisturbed migration patterns, and the Gurwegian people can continue their cultural traditions of living off the land. If there were to be a mass amount of tourists in the area, it would create both a social and environmental impacts. The caribou would alter migration patterns, which in turn would disturb the hunting of the Vuntut people. Carrying capacity. Ecological carrying capacity is concerned with recreational use. It takes into consideration the number and activities that can be accommodated by an area before decline or change has gone too far. Pilgrim and Jenkins describe social carrying capacity as a perception of visitors. Their perceptions can include crowding, behavior of others, solitude, presence of others, and their enjoyment of the area. Limits of acceptable change is a reformulation of the recreation carrying capacity concept, with the primary emphasis now on the conditions desired in the area rather than how much use an area can tolerate. The variables that should be measured in order to evaluate recreational use of the site are the wildlife patterns and the cultural traditions of the Gurwegian people. In order for the Vuntut National Park to continue, it is important to create a management plan that will be successful. I think for the park to be successful, cultural and heritage must be of major importance. These two aspects are very important to the national park. For this reason, it is important to team up with the local people and work with their values and understand their vision for the park. As well, it is important to protect the wildlife. Without the caribou, the Gurwegian people cannot survive. Management procedures. Using the LIC model, it is possible to systematically manage the environment, determining the acceptable, achievable conditions for both ecological and social situations, as well as describing the measures taken. For Vuntut, this would mean figuring out how much change the land and people can handle, and then making a plan that will give specific numerical outcomes. The second step would be to determine the current conditions environmentally and socially, and comparing how well each works with each other. In this case, we would look at the importance of wildlife and how the Gurwegian people live off the land and animals. Next, a plan would be implemented to bring the conditions up to the standards that were placed in Step 1. This would involve setting guidelines to tourists and managing the impacts. Finally, the land will be evaluated for the effectiveness of the plan created. The management procedures will be direct because for this environment it is important to preserve the wildlife for the Vuntut traditions. If the land is not well maintained, these people cannot continue to live the way they have been for centuries. For this reason, the land needs to be carefully managed to ensure no major changes occur socially or environmentally. The user preferences are overshadowed by the residents' needs because they are close to no visitors. This management strategy is a way in which managers are extremely involved. They continuously monitor the changes and adapt the plan to ensure the conditions are up to their assigned standards. Monitoring management. Management will be monitored closely and accurately. It will be important to continue this to ensure proper management is done. While managers are watching changes in the environment, they can alter the plans to suit the needs of the environment and the people. Public involvement is always important in a recreation setting. Although I've been speaking of having a majority of the Gurwegian people's opinion, it is still important to get the user's opinion. To get these people's opinions, verbal exchanges can be made at the end of a trip when exiting, or a written survey can be filled out and sent back to the park. Public involvement is highly valued because it helps managers see problems they would not encounter on a day-to-day basis. Involvement also allows for people to have input in development of the park. Involvement can be facilitated, again, verbally or written. As well, meetings can be held for the public to attend, to voice their opinions, or just get more information on the management of the park. Now, because the park is so remote, meetings will have to be run at a more central location that is accessible. Modifications will be made depending on the opinions of the visitors and the ones living in the area. Decisions must be made that will complement both sides. A modification that may have to be made in the future would be actual tours if there was a high enough demand. If the Vuntut National Park was used more often, it would be important to implement a trail. This trail would ensure that people are not impacting the whole park, but just a smaller section. As years continue, it could be an idea to discontinue some paths and create new ones, so the old can grow back and the users are impacting a separate place. Changes will only be necessary when more visitors enter the Vuntut National Park. Summary. The most significant aspect of this park is how untouched it is already. I believe it is important to keep it this way. Let it remain isolated and do not create direct routes to the Vuntut territory. It will only be accessible to those who are advanced trippers and will go through the efforts of getting to the park. It is also important to leave it this way because it is one of the only parks that is rarely visited. This allows for natural cycles to continue, the caribou can migrate regularly, and the Greenwich people can go about their daily routines undisturbed. This national park will be self-sustaining and will continue to develop naturally. And these were the references used.